Hello and welcome to The Virus. I'm Johanna Nicholson. The US has started vaccinating its youngest citizens. So how long will it be before Australians under 5 years old can receive the COVID-19 jab? Coming up, we speak with one of the country's leading paediatric infectious disease specialists. But first, let's bring in co-host of the ABC's Coronacast, Tegan Taylor. Hi Tegan, how are COVID-19 cases trending in Australia at the moment?
It's a bit of an even keel in Australia at the moment. So an amazing epidemiologist who's based in Adelaide does the numbers for us every day via Twitter, and he calculates what's called the REF. I'm sure that members of the public who watch The Virus are pretty familiar with this topic at the moment, but I'll just explain it anyway. Basically, it's the number of people that someone with COVID is likely to pass it on to, and it gives us a sense of whether numbers are increasing or decreasing. And the REF is still above 1, which means we're still increasing on average the number of cases a day. So just looking at the numbers from a few days ago, around 30,000 new cases, we're still seeing a worryingly high number of deaths, 52 deaths just a couple of days ago, which is, again, about what we've been seeing over this year so far. Even though we're not seeing those daily press conferences anymore, the numbers are actually a lot higher than they were when we were getting pretty worried about them towards the end of last year.
We've spoken on the program before about the BA5 subvariant, and there are concerns about it possibly spreading to another state. Why are there so many concerns about this subvariant?
The reason why it's on the rise is because it has a competitive advantage. So this idea of the survival of the fittest applies to viruses as well. It is more contagious for some reason. And in the case of BA4 and BA5, it seems to be two things. One is that it seems to be stickier than previous versions of the virus. That is, if you're blasting viral particles at your lungs, for example, they're just better at sort of latching onto your cells and entering and then infecting. So that's one thing. And then the other thing with BA4 and 5 is that they seem to be more immune evasive. So they're better at bypassing the immunity that we might have, especially if we've been vaccinated, because the vaccinations are based on the original strain of the coronavirus that came out of China. And it's changed a lot since then on key parts of the virus that it uses to enter our cells. So the good news, if there is some, with this variant is that it doesn't seem to be inherently more it doesn't cause more severe disease on average than previous versions, and it seems to be milder than Delta, same as the other Omicron strains.
And of course, Australia is not the only place dealing with the subvariants. What other countries are dealing with them?
I mean, it's global. So we were seeing this on the rise a few weeks ago in the States and in the US. We're seeing it in Australia now. Europe and other places in the world are dealing with it as well. And the truth is, with so much global travel again, we are moving internationally again. We are transmitting this virus internationally, whether we know it or not. And so it makes sense that if this strain has a competitive advantage, it's going to have a competitive advantage no matter where it is encountering a human body anywhere in the world.
We all know this winter has been really challenging, with so many people getting the flu and also getting COVID. Moderna is looking at developing a combined flu and COVID vaccine. Is that something we could see in the future?
Yeah, if they're developing it, it is something that we probably will see in the future. It's a bit too early. Although we've been dealing with this virus for a couple of years now, it's actually still a bit too early to know exactly what its cycles are in comparison to something like the flu, which we've been dealing with for hundreds of years, so millennia. So with COVID, it might be that the optimum boosting vaccine interval is actually a couple of years. But if there's a combined COVID and flu booster, then it might be more convenient to give that annually, because then you're not asking people to get more than one shot. They can just go and sort of get that done each year.
And how are vaccination rates just for COVID tracking at the moment for those who haven't yet had their booster shot, and also for those who are eligible for a fourth dose?
Yeah, when we were seeing the first and second dose numbers coming through, they were coming through so rapidly. People knew that they were contingent on opening borders and getting back out and enjoying life again as normally as possible. That was contingent on getting vaccinated to those 2 doses. Whereas with the third dose, people are taking it up. It's just at a much slower pace. So I think the 16 plus proportion of people who've had their third dose, which is what you need to be considered up to date these days, was about 60%. We hit that mark back in March, but we're not due to hit the 70% mark until October. So that's definitely fallen by the wayside. And also with people accessing their fourth dose, there is a lot of people who are really keen to get that, but also because the eligibility around that is a little more individual, again, a slower uptake.
Right, co-host of the ABC's Coronacast, Tegan Taylor, thank you.
Thank you.
An additional 17 million children in the US are now eligible for a COVID-19 vaccine after health authorities there approved shots from Moderna and Pfizer. Professor Christine McCartney is a paediatrician and infectious disease specialist. She's also the director of the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance. Professor McCartney, welcome to the program. What bearing does the decision in the United States have here in Australia?
Oh, well, we always look at what the United States does very closely, but Australia, of course, we have our own unique situation and our own very rigorous processes by which to evaluate vaccines and then, assess them for any potential recommendations for the population. So, a lot of close connections between the countries, and we learn from each other. But of course, we need to go through decision making here that's relevant for Australians.
What's been the delay with this age group in particular? They're the last to become eligible for the COVID vaccine. What are the considerations that have had to be taken into account?
Yeah, I don't think it's been so much a delay as really a very purposive recognition that COVID-19 causes disease most severely in older individuals. And of course, we saw that from the very beginnings of the rollout. We saw that from the clinical trials. And the clinical trials of the vaccines have gone progressively down in age. So, of course, we just had registration first for 18 years and above, and we had no trials in teenagers. Then trials moved into teenagers, and the vaccines have been evaluated in teenagers, predominantly the mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna. But we know some of the other companies that have got data in teenagers now and are coming forward. And, then we've seen the mRNA vaccines go into the primary school age children, 5 to 11, and we're now rolling that program out across Australia, and younger children. Younger children tend to have less severe disease, but that doesn't mean they're not at risk of COVID. It doesn't mean they can't have severe disease. And sadly, sometimes, albeit it's very rarely, even pass away from COVID-19. So it's really important that we've put the disease in children in perspective, but also now that we have the opportunity to evaluate vaccines to use in these very youngest of our population.
So now we have had this decision in the US. What are the next steps for Australian authorities, and what sort of timeline would we be looking at here?
Well, the US is the only country to date to have authorised the two vaccines down to 6 months of age. So the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine and the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. And they're starting their programs in that age group. In Australia, those vaccines firstly need to be brought by those companies forward to the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and that's already underway, and the TGA is evaluating those vaccines with all the scrutiny that they would always do. And if they approve the vaccines for use, then of course they have to be available, they have to be supplied, and at the same time as the TGA may or may not approve them, we expect there's a good chance they will, given on what the US have decided, then ATAGI are in parallel looking at the vaccines and will make recommendations on whether they should actually then be used, or recommended for parents to consider for their child.
And then at that point, do we have any indication of how what the rollout might look like? Would it be through vaccine hubs or through GPs or pharmacies?
These are new formulations. It's a lower dose for both vaccines. It's another, way to get used to giving the vaccines for our immunisation providers. It's a 3-dose schedule for the Pfizer vaccine, a 2-dose schedule for the Moderna vaccine. So plenty of training will need to occur if the program was to start, and family-friendly services. That's the thing that I think parents will want to know, that they're going to experienced immunisation providers who know how to safely vaccinate children. And we're so lucky in this country that so many So many do, and we do that so well for our routine vaccines.
And in terms of any potential side effects, would it be similar to what we see in adults who get the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, actually the safety profile is looking really very positive, and you would expect that given that the US are now recommending to use vaccines in this age group. In some regards, there's been fewer side effects in the young children and rates of fever, which are really important to assess in young children because, when a young child has a fever, you worry that it could be from other things or that it could trigger them to feel very unwell. So the rates of fever are really quite reasonable and not, in many ways terribly different from some other vaccines that we already have on the schedule. So I think parents, can be reassured that that data has already been looked at and viewed positively elsewhere. The other thing for parents to know about safety is that, these are no longer new vaccines. They're not experimental vaccines. They're vaccines that we've used now in billions and billions of people around the world with a really positive safety profile. So all of that ought to be taken into account in the decision making. And no one takes this lightly, of course, to come up with these sort of recommendations. But I think, and I hope, families and parents can feel confident in the processes that we'll step through.
What would your advice be to parents who are looking to vaccinate their kids against COVID-19 and trying to make that decision?
Oh, look, I think at this stage we've got the 5 to 11 year program. We've got some parents that mightn't have taken that up yet. We've got around 60% coverage. Now, I think some parents might have delayed because their child has recently got COVID. Others may be delaying because they're uncertain about the necessity of the vaccines. Perhaps others still have questions about safety. Please do have a discussion with your healthcare provider. If your child has had COVID, they are still recommended to be vaccinated. They just have to wait 3 months and then finish the schedule or start the schedule. There's plenty of data on safety. We've got fantastic data up on our AusVac safety website. And it is really, we recommend, important for children to be vaccinated to prevent things like long COVID, rare inflammatory syndromes, and still we're seeing children hospitalised against COVID. So plenty of information to check out. But can I add one thing, Jo? Don't forget to get your own booster. And for the grandparents, if they're over 65, they need that second booster. It's really important as we head into winter to keep in best health through being up to date with your vaccine schedule, look at what treatments might be out there if you do become ill with COVID. So really a lot of tools in the toolbox that we can use to keep the whole family protected now.
Professor Christine McCartney, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And that's the show for this week. Thanks for your company. Bye for now.